The Valoran Dominion had ruled the stars for 3,000 years. Their empire stretched across 10,000 worlds, and their fleet of crystalline warships numbered in the millions. No species had ever defeated them in battle. No planet had ever resisted their conquest. They were the masters of the galaxy, and they knew it. When their long-range sensors detected a small blue planet spinning quietly on the edge of their territory, they did what they had always done. They sent ships to claim it. Admiral Kethra commanded the envoy fleet. She was old by Valoran standards, with scales that had turned from bright purple to deep violet over centuries of service. She had conquered 47 worlds in her career and had never lost a single engagement. The mission to this unknown planet was supposed to be simple. Find the natives. Demand surrender. Crush any resistance. Her fleet consisted of 200 warships. Each vessel was beautiful in a terrible way, grown from living crystal that could heal itself after battle damage. Each ship carried enough firepower to turn a continent into glass. For the Valoran, this was not even a proper invasion force. It was merely an envoy, a small taste of the power that waited behind it. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the fourth planet of the system. From there, they scanned the third planet, the blue one with the swirling white clouds. What they found confused them. The planet was covered with cities. Billions of small creatures lived on its surface. They had primitive spacecraft orbiting their world, and they had even sent simple robots to explore their neighboring planets. But they had no warships. No orbital defense platforms. No weapons capable of reaching beyond their own atmosphere. Admiral Kethra felt something close to disappointment. This would not even be a challenge. She ordered her communications officer to send the standard ultimatum. The message was simple. Surrender within 14 cycles or face complete destruction. Submit to Valoran rule or watch your cities burn. There was no negotiation. There never was. On Earth, the message arrived at exactly 3:47 in the morning, Eastern Standard Time. It was received simultaneously by every major government, every military installation, and every news network on the planet. Within an hour, the world knew that humanity was not alone in the universe. Within 2 hours, they knew that the beings who had found them wanted to enslave them. Panic spread quickly. Stock markets crashed. Riots broke out in major cities. Religious leaders called for prayer. Military commanders called for calm. Politicians called for emergency sessions. Everyone called for answers that no one had. Commander Jake Morrison stood in the underground war room of the United Nations Defense Council. He was 43 years old, with short gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. He had served in 3 wars and had commanded troops on 4 continents. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for this. Around him stood the most powerful military leaders on Earth. Generals and admirals from every major nation watched the holographic display that showed the alien fleet approaching. 200 ships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. They would arrive in 12 days. What are our options? Asked General Liu Wei, the Chinese representative. We have none, replied Admiral Sophie Grant from the United States Navy. Our most powerful weapons cannot reach them. Even if we launched every nuclear missile on Earth, they would destroy them before they got close. Our aircraft cannot fly in space. Our ships cannot leave the ocean. We are defenseless. The room fell silent. On the screen, the alien fleet continued its steady approach. Lieutenant Katie Brooks, the young communications officer assigned to the war room, looked up from her console. Sir, we have received a response from the President. He is asking what we intend to do. Jake Morrison stared at the screen for a long moment. He thought about his daughter, who was probably watching the news right now with terror in her eyes. He thought about the billions of people around the world who were looking to their leaders for hope. He thought about everything humanity had built over thousands of years of struggle and progress. Then he thought about something else, something that very few people on Earth knew existed. "Get me a secure line to Nevada," he said quietly. The other officers looked at him with confusion, but Katie Brooks understood. Her fingers moved across her console, establishing a connection that was not supposed to exist, to a facility that was not on any map. A face appeared on the screen. It belonged to Dr. Nathan Cole, a man with wild white hair and thick glasses. He looked like he had not slept in days, but his eyes were sharp and alert. "Commander Morrison," he said, "I assume you are calling about our visitors. Is it ready?" Jake asked. Nathan Cole smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had spent 40 years waiting for this moment and had hoped it would never come. "The Horizon is ready," he said. "She has been ready for 5 years. We were just hoping we would never have to wake her up." Jake nodded slowly. "Wake her up, Doctor. It is time for humanity to meet its guests." Deep beneath the Nevada desert, in a cavern so vast that it had its own weather patterns, something stirred. Lights that had been dark for years flickered to life. Generators that had been silent began to hum. And a ship that had been sleeping since its construction was completed began to wake. The USS Horizon was not like any vessel humanity had ever built. It was not built with human technology. In 1952, a craft of unknown origin had crashed in the Nevada desert. For 70 years, the greatest minds on Earth had studied its secrets. They had learned things that changed everything they thought they knew about physics. They had discovered materials that should not exist and energy sources that defied explanation. And they had built a ship. The Horizon was 12 kilometers long. Its hull was made of an alloy that did not appear on any periodic table, a metal so strong that it could withstand the heat of a star. Its weapons could bend gravity itself, crushing anything in their path. Its shields could absorb more energy than a nuclear explosion. Its engines could cross the galaxy in days. It was not a warship. It was a message, a statement, a warning. Captain Amy Patterson had been preparing for this day for 15 years. She had been recruited out of the Air Force Academy when she was just 22 years old. She had trained in secret, studied technologies that the public did not know existed, and waited for the moment when Earth would need her. Now that moment had come. She walked through the corridors of the Horizon, her boots echoing on the metallic floor. The ship was waking up around her. Systems were coming online. Crew members were taking their stations. In the engine room, Dr. Nathan Cole was running final checks on the reactor that would power their journey. Amy reached the bridge and took her seat in the captain's chair. Around her, 11 officers watched their consoles with a mixture of fear and determination. They all knew what was at stake. They all knew that the fate of 8 billion people rested on their shoulders. "All stations report ready," announced Lieutenant Chris Vance from the tactical console. Amy looked at the main view screen. Above them, beyond thousands of feet of rock and sand, the alien fleet was approaching. They thought Earth was helpless. They thought humanity would surrender without a fight. They thought this would be easy. They were wrong. "Open the bay doors," Amy commanded. "It is time to show our guests what humanity is made of." The desert floor began to split open, revealing a shaft of light that reached down into the darkness below. And from that darkness, the horizon began to rise. The ground shook across 3 states. People in Las Vegas felt their buildings tremble. Drivers on the highways stopped their cars and looked toward the horizon. Seismographs around the world registered an event that scientists could not explain. Something massive was moving beneath the Nevada desert. Captain Amy Patterson gripped the armrests of her chair as the horizon rose through the launch shaft. The ship moved slowly at first, its engines fighting against gravity and the weight of its own massive hull. Dust and sand poured down around them like rain. The shaft walls, reinforced with the same alien metal that covered the ship, glowed with heat from the friction of their passage. Altitude 1,000 feet, reported Lieutenant Chris Vance. 2,000 feet. We are clearing the surface now. The main view screen switched from interior cameras to external sensors. Amy saw the Nevada desert spreading out below them, brown and empty under the afternoon sun. The shaft opening looked like a wound in the earth, a dark circle from which the horizon emerged like a creature being born. News helicopters were already circling in the distance. They had been drawn by the earthquakes and the strange lights. Their cameras captured images that would change history. A ship the size of a city rising from the ground. A vessel of impossible design ascending into the sky. Humanity's greatest secret revealed to the world. Amy allowed herself a moment to appreciate what was happening. For 70 years, thousands of people had worked in complete secrecy to make this moment possible. Scientists had died of old age without ever telling their families what they had accomplished. Engineers had given their entire careers to a project they could never speak about. And now, finally, their work would be seen by everyone. "We are clear of the shaft," Chris announced. "Engaging primary thrusters." The horizon accelerated. The Nevada desert shrank below them. The blue sky darkened as they climbed higher and higher. Within minutes, they had left the atmosphere behind. The earth hung below them like a blue marble, beautiful and fragile. In the war room beneath the United Nations headquarters, Commander Jake Morrison watched the launch on a secure feed. Around him, the military leaders of Earth stared in silence. Most of them had not known about Project Sentinel. Most of them had believed, until this moment, that humanity had no hope. "What is that thing?" asked General Liu Wei, his voice barely a whisper. "That is the horizon," Jake replied. "Our insurance policy. Our last resort. Our answer to anyone who thinks Earth is an easy target." Admiral Sophie Grant leaned forward, studying the data scrolling across her screen. "The readings make no sense. That ship should not be able to fly. Its mass alone should make it impossible to lift. And those energy signatures coming from its reactor are beyond anything we have ever measured." Jake nodded. "The ship was built using technology we did not invent. We found it. We studied it. And we learned from it. That is all I can tell you." In the skies above Earth, the horizon turned toward the approaching alien fleet. Captain Amy Patterson studied the tactical display that showed the enemy positions. 200 crystalline warships, each one bristling with weapons. They were still 12 days away at normal speed. But the horizon was not going to wait for them. "Navigation, plot a jump course to intercept the Valoran fleet," Amy ordered. "We are going to meet them halfway." Lieutenant Megan Torres, the navigation officer, worked quickly at her console. "Course plotted, Captain. Ready to engage faster than light drive on your command." Amy opened a channel to the engine room. "Dr. Cole, how are we looking?" Nathan Cole's voice came back through the speakers, calm and steady despite the circumstances. "The reactor is running at optimal efficiency. All systems are green. The horizon is performing exactly as designed. She is ready for whatever you need her to do." Amy closed the channel and looked around her bridge. These 11 officers were the best humanity had to offer. Lieutenant Chris Vance at Tactical, a former Marine who had qualified expert with every weapon system on Earth. Lieutenant Megan Torres at Navigation, a mathematician who had written 3 papers on theoretical physics before being recruited into the project. Lieutenant Ryan Hall at Sensors, a young man with the sharpest eyes and the quickest mind Amy had ever seen. And 8 others, each one chosen for their skills and their courage. "Listen to me," Amy said, her voice firm but kind. "In a few minutes, we are going to do something that has never been done before. We are going to face an enemy that has never been defeated. We are going to fight for our planet, our families, and our entire species. I will not lie to you. I do not know what will happen out there. But I do know this. We are human beings. And human beings do not give up." The bridge crew nodded, their faces set with determination. Fear was there too, hiding behind their eyes, but they pushed it down. They had a job to do. "Engage faster-than-light drive," Amy commanded. The stars stretched into lines of light around them. The horizon leaped forward, crossing distances that should have taken years in mere seconds. Space folded around them, carrying them toward their destiny. On Earth, the world watched and waited. The Horizon's launch had been broadcast everywhere. Every news channel showed the footage on endless repeat. Every social media platform overflowed with speculation and wonder. Some people celebrated, believing that salvation had arrived. Others panicked, convinced that the aliens would destroy this new ship just as easily as they would have destroyed everything else. In a small house in Ohio, a 12-year-old girl named Sophie Morrison sat in front of her television. She had not slept since the alien message arrived. She had not eaten. She had just watched and worried and prayed. Now she watched the horizon rising into the sky, and she thought about her father. Commander Jig Morrison had called her 3 hours ago. He had told her that everything was going to be okay. He had told her that humanity had a plan. He had told her to be brave. She did not know that her father was one of the people who had helped keep the horizon secret. She did not know that he had spent years preparing for this exact moment. All she knew was that somewhere out there, among the stars, someone was fighting for her. The horizon dropped out of faster-than-light travel exactly where Megan Torres had calculated. The alien fleet appeared on their sensors instantly. 200 warships arranged in a perfect formation. They were still approaching Earth, still confident in their superiority. Admiral Kethra was in her command chamber when the alarm sounded. She turned to her sensor officer, her scales rippling with annoyance. "What is it now?" she demanded. "Admiral, an unknown vessel has appeared directly in our path. It emerged from faster-than-light travel, approximately 10,000 kilometers ahead of the fleet." Kethra's eyes narrowed. The primitive species from the third planet? They have faster-than-light capability? That was not in our initial scans. It was not, Admiral. Our scans showed no such technology. But the vessel is definitely there. And Admiral, its energy signature is unlike anything in our databases. Kethra moved to the main view screen and studied the image of the human ship. It was ugly by Valoran standards, all sharp angles and dark metal. Nothing like the graceful curves of her crystalline warships. But there was something about it that made her uncomfortable. Something that whispered danger in the back of her mind. She pushed the feeling aside. The Valoran had ruled the stars for 3,000 years. They had crushed countless species who thought they could resist. One ship, no matter how unusual, could not stand against 200. "Open a communication channel," she ordered. "Let us speak with these creatures and explain their situation." On the horizon, a signal light flashed on the communications console. "Captain, the alien flagship is hailing us," reported Lieutenant Katie Brooks, who had transferred from the war room to serve aboard the ship. Amy took a deep breath. This was the moment she had trained for. The moment humanity had been dreading and preparing for since they first looked up at the stars and wondered if they were alone. "Put them through," she said. The view screen flickered, and Amy found herself looking at the face of an alien being. The creature had purple scales and multiple eyes that blinked independently of each other. It wore what appeared to be a military uniform decorated with symbols Amy did not recognize. Unknown vessel. the alien said, its voice translated by the ship's computers. "I am Admiral Kethra of the Valoran Dominion. You are trespassing in territory claimed by the Empire. You will power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in your destruction." Amy stood up from her chair. She straightened her uniform and looked directly into the alien's eyes. When she spoke, her voice was calm and clear and utterly without fear. "Admiral Kethra, I am Captain Amy Patterson of the Earth vessel Horizon. Your fleet has threatened my planet with extinction. I am not here to surrender. I am here to give you one chance to survive." Admiral Kethra stared at the human on her view screen with a mixture of confusion and amusement. In her 300 years of conquest, she had heard many things from the species she had come to subjugate: pleading, bargaining, threats born of desperation. But never had she encountered such calm defiance from a creature facing certain destruction. The human female was small by Valoran standards. Her skin was soft and unprotected. Her eyes held only 2 pupils instead of the proper 4. She looked fragile, like something that would break if you pressed too hard. And yet she stood there on her bridge, speaking of giving the Valoran a chance to survive. It was almost funny. "You misunderstand your situation," Kethra said, allowing a note of patience to enter her voice. She had time. There was no rush to destroy this amusing creature. "You are one ship. I command 200. Your planet has no defenses. Your species has no allies. In 14 cycles, the Dominion will own your world, and your people will serve us until the stars grow cold." Captain Amy Patterson did not flinch. She did not blink. She simply stood there, her hands clasped behind her back, her expression unchanged. "I am going to give you 30 seconds to begin your retreat," Amy said. "After that, I cannot promise your safety." On the bridge of the Valoran flagship, officers exchanged glances of disbelief. Some of them made sounds that Amy's translator interpreted as laughter. Admiral Kethra tilted her head, studying the human with new interest. "You are either very brave or very foolish," the Admiral said. "I have not decided which. Perhaps you do not understand what our weapons can do. Perhaps a demonstration is needed." She turned to her weapons officer. "Target that ship. All vessels. Full barrage." The order went out across the Valoran fleet. 200 warships adjusted their positions, bringing their crystal cannons to bear on the lone human vessel. On 100 different bridges, weapons officers confirmed their locks. Energy began to build in firing chambers that had reduced cities to ash and turned moons to rubble. On the horizon, Lieutenant Ryan Hall watched his sensor console with growing alarm. "Captain, they are charging weapons. All of them. I am reading power levels that are off the scale." Amy nodded but did not move. "Shields at maximum. All hands, brace for impact." The Valoran fleet fired. It was not a coordinated volley. It was an avalanche of destruction. 200 ships unleashed everything they had at the same moment. Beams of concentrated energy crossed the void between the fleets. Missiles that could crack a planet's crust screamed through space. Gravity weapons bent the light around them as they sought their target. The space around the horizon turned white. For a long moment, nothing could be seen through the blinding light of the attack. On the Valoran flagship, officers watched their sensors with satisfaction, waiting for the confirmation of the human ship's destruction. The light faded. The horizon was still there. Lieutenant Ryan Hall looked up from his console, his eyes wide with amazement. "Captain, our shields absorbed 100% of their attack. We did not even register a fluctuation. It is like they were throwing pebbles at a mountain." On the Valoran flagship, silence fell like a physical weight. Admiral Kethra stared at her view screen, watching the impossible image of the human ship floating untouched in space. Her scales had gone pale. shifting from violet to a sickly gray. "That is not possible," whispered her sensor officer. "We hit them with enough power to destroy a fleet. Nothing can survive that." Kethra said nothing. For the first time in her long career, she did not know what to say. Captain Amy Patterson sat back down in her chair. She took a moment to smooth her uniform before speaking. When she addressed the bridge crew, her voice was calm and professional. "Lieutenant Vance, target the enemy flagship. Single shot. Graviton cannon." Chris Vance's fingers moved across his console. "Target locked, Captain. Fire." The Horizon's main weapon activated. It did not fire a beam of light or launch a projectile. Instead, it created something far more terrible. A focus point of gravitational force, so intense that it warped space itself, lanced across the distance between the ships. The graviton pulse struck Admiral Kethra's flagship in its center. The effect was instantaneous and horrifying. The crystalline warship, a vessel that had taken decades to grow and centuries to perfect, began to collapse. It folded in on itself like paper being crumpled by an invisible hand. Metal and crystal and crew members were compressed together, crushed by forces that nothing in the universe could withstand. In less than 3 seconds, the Valoran flagship went from being a ship 1,200 meters long to being a sphere no larger than a marble. Then even that disappeared, falling into a gravity well so deep that light itself could not escape. Admiral Kethra and her crew of 3,000 were gone. The remaining 199 Valoran ships did not move. Their commanders stared at their sensors, watching the impossible readings, trying to understand what had just happened. Their most powerful attack had done nothing. One shot from the human vessel had destroyed their flagship completely. On the horizon, the bridge crew sat in stunned silence. They had trained with simulations. They had studied the theoretical capabilities of their ship. But seeing it work in reality was something else entirely. Lieutenant Megan Torres was the first to speak. "Did we just do that?" "We did," Amy replied. "And we will do it again if we have to." She opened a communication channel that broadcast to every ship in the Valoran fleet. Her voice carried across space to 199 bridges where terrified aliens waited to hear their fate. "Attention, Valoran fleet. Your admiral is dead. Your flagship is destroyed. I am giving you one chance to withdraw. If any of your ships make a hostile move toward Earth or the horizon, I will destroy you. If you attempt to call for reinforcements, I will destroy you. If you do anything other than turn around and leave this system immediately, I will destroy every single one of you." She paused, letting her words sink in across the fleet. This is not a negotiation. This is not a request. This is your only warning. You have 60 seconds to begin your retreat. On the Valoran ship Crimson Tide, Commander Velrath stood before his crew. He was young for a command position, barely a century old. He had risen quickly through the ranks because of his aggression and his willingness to take risks. Now he faced a decision that would define his entire career. "We cannot run," he said to his bridge officers. "The Dominion does not run from primitives. If we flee from one ship, we will be disgraced forever." His tactical officer, a female named Sharia, shook her head. "Commander, that one ship destroyed the flagship with a single shot. Our weapons did nothing to its shields. We cannot win this fight. Then we die with honor," Velrath replied. "All ships that will follow me, target the human vessel. We attack together." 12 ships responded to his call. 12 commanders who valued pride over survival. They broke formation and accelerated toward the horizon, their weapons charging for a final desperate assault. On the horizon, Lieutenant Ryan Hall tracked their approach. "Captain, we have 12 vessels breaking formation. They are charging weapons and accelerating toward us." Amy watched them come. She felt no anger toward these aliens. They were soldiers following their code, doing what they believed was right. In another life, in another universe, they might have been allies. But this was not that universe. Target all 12 vessels, she ordered. Synchronized fire. Graviton cannons. The Horizon's weapons spoke again. 12 beams of gravitational force reached out across space. 12 Valoran warships crumpled and collapsed and vanished from existence. The attack lasted less than 5 seconds. The remaining 187 ships did not wait to see more. They activated their faster-than-light drives and fled. Some were so panicked that they collided with each other during the jump, their navigation systems overwhelmed by fear and haste. Others made it away cleanly, carrying with them the story of what had happened, the tale of the human ship that could not be harmed and could not be stopped. Within 10 minutes, the Horizon floated alone in empty space. The Valoran fleet was gone. Lieutenant Kevin Price, the youngest officer on the bridge, let out a breath he had been holding since the battle began. His hands were shaking slightly as he looked up from his console. "They are gone," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "All of them. They just ran away." Captain Amy Patterson stood up from her chair. She walked to the center of the bridge and looked around at her crew. These 11 officers had just changed the course of history. They had faced an enemy that had conquered thousands of worlds and had sent them running in terror. "Well done," she said quietly. "All of you. Well done." She turned back to the view screen, which now showed only stars and empty space. Somewhere out there, the remnants of the Valoran fleet were racing back to their empire. They would carry news of what had happened here. They would tell their leaders about the ship from Earth, and the galaxy would learn what humanity was capable of. The news of the battle spread across the Valoran Dominion like a disease. It moved from ship to ship, from outpost to outpost, from world to world. Within hours, every corner of the empire knew what had happened. A single vessel from an unknown species had destroyed 13 of their warships without taking any damage. The rest of the fleet had fled in terror. In the capital of the Dominion, on a world called Vela Prime, the ruling council gathered in emergency session. 7 ancient beings sat around a table made of living crystal, their scales pale with shock and anger. For 3,000 years, they had ruled without challenge. Now they faced something they had almost forgotten existed. Fear. "This cannot be allowed to stand," said High Counselor Moreth, the oldest and most powerful of the 7. "One ship defeats 200? If this story spreads beyond our borders, every subjugated species will think they can resist us." "The story has already spread," replied Counselor Jethra, who controlled the Dominion's intelligence network. "Our communications have been monitored by at least 40 different civilizations. The Carthan Confederacy, the Mandari Collective, the Outer Rim Alliance. They all know what happened." Morith slammed his fist against the table, cracking the crystal surface. "Then we send the full fleet. Not 200 ships. Not 2,000. We send everything. We burn that planet to ash and scatter its people across the void." The council chamber fell silent. Every member knew what Morith was proposing. The Valoran military consisted of over 2 million warships. Deploying them all against a single world would leave the Empire defenseless against its many enemies. It would be an act of desperation, not strength. But what choice did they have? Far away, in the space above Earth, Captain Amy Patterson watched the stars and thought about what came next. The battle was over, but the war had just begun. The Valoran would return. They had to. An empire built on fear could not allow a defeat like this to go unanswered. "Captain," said Lieutenant Katie Brooks from the communications console, "I am receiving transmissions from Earth. Every major government wants to speak with you. The President, the Prime Ministers, The General Secretary. Everyone. Amy smiled slightly. I imagine they do. Tell them I will address the United Nations in person when we return. But first, there is something else we need to do. She turned to Lieutenant Megan Torres. Navigation. Can you access the Galactic Communications Network? The one the Valoran used to coordinate their empire? Megan's fingers danced across her console. Yes, Captain. We captured their encryption protocols during the battle. I can broadcast on their network if you want. I want, Amy said. Open a channel. Maximum range. I want every civilization in this galaxy to hear what I have to say. The Horizon's communications array came to life. It was far more powerful than anything humanity had ever built, capable of sending signals across light years in seconds. Megan configured it to broadcast on every frequency the Valoran used, ensuring that the message would be received by friend and enemy alike. Amy stood in front of the main view screen. She straightened her uniform and took a deep breath. Somewhere out there, billions of alien beings were about to hear from humanity for the first time. This message would define how the galaxy saw her species. It had to be perfect. This is Captain Amy Patterson of the Earth vessel Horizon, speaking on behalf of humanity. I am broadcasting this message to all civilizations who can hear it. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Today, the Valoran Dominion sent a fleet to conquer my planet. They expected to find a primitive species, easy to enslave, easy to control. They were wrong. Their fleet has been defeated. Their ships have been destroyed or driven away. Earth remains free. On 1,000 different worlds, beings of every shape and size listened to the humans' words. Some had never heard of Earth before. Others had watched the battle from a distance, hardly believing what they saw. All of them listened now. I want to be clear about something, Amy continued. We did not build the Horizon because we wanted war. We built it because we understand the universe we live in. We know that there are powers out there who see conquest as their right and domination as their destiny. We know that the only way for a species to survive in this galaxy is to be strong enough to protect itself. In the chambers of the Carthan Confederacy, a council of elected representatives watched the broadcast with growing hope. The Carthan had resisted Valoran expansion for centuries, fighting a desperate holding action that had cost them millions of lives. They had always believed they were alone in their struggle. Now they knew they were not. To the Valoran Dominion, Amy said, her voice hardening, I offer this warning. Earth is not a world to be conquered. Humanity is not a species to be enslaved. If you come to our system with warships, we will destroy them. If you threaten our people, we will make you regret it. The days of easy conquest are over. On Vela Prime, the ruling council watched the humans speak. High Counselor Morith's sails had gone from pale to almost white, a sign of rage so intense it bordered on madness. This creature, this soft-skinned primitive, was lecturing the rulers of 1,000 worlds on the nature of strength. But to everyone else, Amy continued, to all the civilizations who have suffered under Valoran rule, who have watched their worlds burn and their people die, I offer something different. I offer hope. Humanity does not seek empire. We do not want to rule over others. We only want to live in peace and to help others do the same. She stepped closer to the screen, her eyes intense and sincere. If there are those out there who share our values, who believe in freedom and cooperation rather than conquest and domination, we want to hear from you. Earth is open to friendship. We are open to alliance. We are open to building a galaxy where species can thrive together rather than being ground under the heel of those who see power as the only virtue. The message was received by over 40,000 civilizations across the galaxy. Most of them were small, weak, insignificant in the grand scheme of things. They had never dared to dream of standing against the Valoran. They had never imagined that anyone could. Now, for the first time in 3,000 years, they began to wonder. "Finally," Amy said, "to anyone who is listening, I want you to understand something about humanity. We are a young species. We have only been traveling among the stars for a few decades. We have made many mistakes in our history, and we will probably make many more. We are not perfect, and we do not claim to be." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was filled with quiet pride. "But we are survivors. We have faced extinction before, from ice ages and plagues and wars of our own making, and we have always found a way to continue. We do not give up. We do not surrender. We do not accept that our fate is in anyone's hands but our own. And that is why, no matter what comes next, humanity will endure." The broadcast ended. Captain Amy Patterson stepped back from the screen and let out a long breath. Around her, the bridge crew sat in stunned silence. They had just witnessed their captain declare humanity's existence to the entire galaxy. Nothing would ever be the same again. "Well," said Lieutenant Chris Vance, breaking the silence, "I guess we are famous now." A small laugh rippled through the bridge, breaking the tension. Amy smiled and shook her head. "Famous is one word for it. Let us hope we have not made too many enemies today." "We have definitely made some friends," said Lieutenant Katie Brooks, looking at her console. "I am receiving responses already. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Species I have never heard of, all wanting to talk to us." Amy nodded slowly. This was what she had hoped for. The Valoran Empire was vast, but it was also hated. Countless species had been crushed under its rule, waiting for a chance to break free. Humanity had just shown them that freedom was possible. "Set a course for Earth," she ordered. "We have a lot of work to do when we get home." The horizon turned and accelerated toward the distant blue dot that was humanity's home. Behind it, the stars seemed brighter somehow, as if the galaxy itself was waking up from a long and troubled sleep. On Earth, billions of people watched the recording of Amy's message. They heard their species declared to the universe. They heard a promise of strength and a hope for peace. Many of them cried, some from fear of what was coming, most from pride in what they had become. In the war room beneath the United Nations headquarters, Commander Jake Morrison watched the broadcast with tears in his eyes. He thought about his daughter, who would grow up in a galaxy that knew her species existed. He thought about the future that had seemed so dark just a few days ago. And he thought about the woman on that ship, the captain who had spoken for all of humanity, who had told the universe exactly who and what they were. "Well done, Captain," he said quietly to the empty room. "Well done." 3 months had passed since the Horizon's victory. 3 months since humanity announced itself to the galaxy. 3 months since everything changed. The Horizon descended through the clouds above New York City, its massive hull blocking out the sun as it approached the landing zone that had been hastily constructed in Central Park. Millions of people lined the streets, craning their necks to watch the ship that had saved their world. They cheered and waved flags and held signs with messages of gratitude and hope. Captain Amy Patterson stood at the observation window and watched them. She had not been home since the battle. There had been too much to do. Diplomatic missions, survey expeditions, meetings with alien civilizations who had traveled across the galaxy to speak with the humans who had defied the Valoran. She had shaken hands with beings made of crystal and negotiated treaties with creatures who breathed methane instead of oxygen. But now, finally, she was home. The ship touched down with barely a tremor. The landing ramps extended, and Captain Patterson walked out into the sunlight. The crowd erupted with noise so loud it was almost physical. She raised a hand in greeting and allowed herself a smile. Waiting for her at the bottom of the ramp was Commander Jake Morrison. He looked older than she remembered, the lines on his face deeper, the gray in his hair more pronounced. But his eyes were bright with pride and relief. "Welcome home, Captain," he said. "It is good to be back, Commander." They walked together through the crowds, surrounded by security personnel who struggled to maintain order in the face of so many people wanting to get close. The path led to a stage that had been set up at the edge of the park, where the leaders of Earth waited to welcome their hero. The President of the United States stood at the front, flanked by prime ministers and presidents from nations around the world. Behind them sat representatives from 15 alien civilizations who had come to Earth to witness this moment. The Carthan ambassador, a tall being with silver skin and 4 arms, watched with particular interest. Her people had just signed a defense treaty with humanity, the first formal alliance Earth had ever made with an alien power. Captain Patterson took the stage and stood before a microphone. The crowd fell silent, millions of faces looking up at her with hope and expectation. She looked out at them for a long moment before speaking. 3 months ago, she began, we were alone. We looked up at the stars and wondered if there was anyone else out there, and we feared what we might find. We imagined alien civilizations that might crush us without a second thought. We built the horizon in secret because we were afraid of what the universe might hold. She paused, letting her words settle over the crowd. We were right to be afraid. The universe is a dangerous place. There are powers out there that see conquest as their right and domination as their purpose. The Valaran Dominion sent 200 ships to enslave us because they believed we were weak. They believed we would surrender without a fight. A murmur ran through the crowd, the memory of those terrifying days still fresh in everyone's minds. But we showed them something different. We showed them that humanity is not weak. We showed them that we will not surrender. We showed them that when our home is threatened, we will fight with everything we have. The crowd began to cheer again, but Amy raised her hand for silence. That victory was just the beginning. Since then, we have made contact with over 200 civilizations. Some of them have been subjugated by the Valaran for centuries. Some of them have been fighting for their freedom for longer than humans have existed. They reached out to us because they saw something in humanity that gave them hope. They saw a species that stood up to tyranny and won. In the crowd, Sophie Morrison stood with her mother, watching the woman who had saved their world. She thought about her father, who was somewhere behind the stage, helping to coordinate the security for this event. She thought about how scared she had been when the alien message first arrived, and how different everything felt now. Today, Amy continued, I am proud to announce that Earth has formally joined the Galactic Freedom Coalition. This is an alliance of 37 species who have pledged to support each other against aggression, to defend the weak against the strong, and to build a galaxy where freedom is not just a dream, but a reality. The alien ambassadors rose from their seats, joining the applause that swept through the crowd. The Carthan ambassador allowed herself a rare smile. Her people had waited 3,000 years for this moment. They had almost given up hope. And then a young species from a small blue planet had changed everything. We do not know what the future holds, Amy said. The Valaran are still out there. They are angry, and they are scared, and that makes them dangerous. There will be more battles to come. More sacrifices will be asked of us. But I believe in humanity. I believe in what we can accomplish when we stand together. And I believe that no matter what challenges we face, we will meet them with courage and determination. She looked out at the sea of faces, at the humans and aliens who had gathered to hear her speak. The universe is no longer something to fear. It is something to explore, to understand, to embrace. There are wonders out there that we cannot imagine. There are friends we have not yet met. There are possibilities that are waiting for us to discover them. And humanity will be part of that great adventure. She stepped back from the microphone, and the crowd exploded with applause. Fireworks burst in the sky above the park, even though it was barely afternoon. Music played from speakers set up throughout the city. People hugged and cried and celebrated in a way that Earth had never seen before. In the Nevada desert, deep beneath the surface, Dr. Nathan Cole walked through the construction facility that now employed over 50,000 workers. The Horizon had been humanity's first real warship. It would not be the last. The USS Valor was nearly complete, its 12-kilometer hull gleaming under the artificial lights. Beyond it, the skeletons of 3 more vessels were taking shape. The USS Defiance, the USS Liberty, the USS Hope. Each one was slightly different from the Horizon, incorporating lessons learned from the battle and from the alien technologies that their new allies had shared. Nathan Cole had spent his entire life preparing for a war that he hoped would never come. Now that war was here, and humanity was building an armada to fight it. Part of him was terrified by what they were creating. Another part was proud beyond words. "Dr. Cole," said his assistant, a young engineer named Lucy Park, "the Carthan technical team has arrived. They want to discuss integrating their shield technology with our existing systems." Nathan nodded. "Show them to the conference room. I will be there in a minute." He stood alone for a moment, looking at the ships that would carry humanity into the stars. He thought about all the people who had worked in secret for 70 years, believing they would never see their efforts pay off. He thought about the scientists who had died without ever knowing if their sacrifices mattered. They mattered. They all mattered. Because of them, humanity had survived. Because of them, the galaxy had hope. On the stage in Central Park, Captain Amy Patterson shook hands with world leaders and alien ambassadors. She posed for photographs and answered questions from reporters. She did everything that was expected of her, playing the role of the hero who had saved Earth. But inside, she was already thinking about what came next. The Valaran would not wait forever. Their ruling council was meeting even now, planning their revenge. Intelligence reports suggested they were gathering a fleet larger than anything the galaxy had ever seen. 1,000,000 ships or more, all aimed at the small blue planet that had dared to defy them. When that fleet came, humanity would be ready. The Horizon would not fight alone. The coalition would stand together. And if the Valorum wanted a war, they would get one. As the sun set over New York City, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, Amy looked up at the stars that were just beginning to appear. Somewhere out there, enemies were plotting, and allies were waiting, and the future was unwritten. She smiled. Whatever came next, humanity would face it the way they always had. Together. The age of fear was over. The age of humanity had begun.